Strategists for the main parties say they don't want to up the rhetoric any further and risk giving Nigel Farage what they call martyr status. I caught up with the UKIP leader as he campaigned by Manston Airport in Kent. He'd said on Sunday he'd made a mistake with his language. What did he think he'd got wrong?
I was asked a question, would people be concerned? And I think the answer is a lot of people would be concerned because they know there is the trafficking problem, they know there is the crime problem. But I in no way want to give the impression, as I might have done at the end of last week, that a whole group of people should be labelled as being bad. I don't. And, of course, the vast majority of Romanian people who come to this country are good people who are working hard.
But some people are already saying the mask has slipped. What you actually did there was maybe a bit tired, end of a long day. You let slip what you really think, which is that...
what I did was I didn't answer the question. I said, look, you know what I mean. I was, in a way, what I was trying
But my question is, did the mask slip?
No, the answer is, I didn't do what I normally do, which is if I'm asked a question, to answer it honestly. I really didn't want to have a debate on this issue, but I've now been forced into it. And when you look at it, when you discuss it, you realise, actually, open-door immigration to some southern and eastern European countries, frankly, doesn't make sense. And we should. I've spoken to the police, I've spoken to the border agency staff at Dover, and they are just tearing their hair out because they haven't got the ability to stop known criminals from coming into the country. And that, I think, is a power that we need to have.
The danger in what you said, wasn't it, is that it has echoes of things that were said in the 60s, the 70s, about having, whether it was Irish living next door or black people living next door. That's the potent...
Well, and that's why I said yesterday, if by not dealing with this issue head on, I've given that impression, I'm sorry.
But other politicians don't fall into that trap. What some people might argue is that you're playing rather close to the wire on this, and that's how you've fallen into
Other politicians don't discuss
You're pushing the envelope a bit, like.
Other politicians won't discuss this issue. They want to brush it under the carpet, and they don't want to debate about it. And I do want to have a debate about it, but I want it to be on the right terms. And I repeat, I in no way want to give the impression that Romanians are being singled out here. They're not. It's just that their country.
No other politician has to go around apologising for singling out races, and you do. Doesn't it say something?
Well, it's never happened. Well, it's never happened before.
Doesn't it say something about your politics that you've got yourself into this position?
No, I don't think it does. I didn't want to have this argument. I didn't want to have this debate. All through this European election campaign, we have talked in general terms and broad terms about open-door migration, about numbers. We haven't even touched, frankly, on the crime issue. But sometimes, when you do a lot of interviews, you don't always get it right. And hands up, I didn't get it quite right. So we've now finished up having a debate about this, but in no way, do I detract from the idea that we need to have a proper control policy with countries like Romania.
In terms of the ad itself and what you put in the paper today, 92% of ATM crime in London is committed by Romanians. The Met tell me there is no such thing. The Met police say there's no such thing as ATM crime. It's not a statistic that is formally kept.
Well, we got that from a senior Metropolitan Police officer, and if you look at the advert, every single statistic I quote is sourced.
And the second statistic, 28,000 Romanians arrested in the last 5 years. Arrests, this is, not charges. Well, we don't know what for. We don't know whether charges happened. I mean, aren't you in danger of feeding the scare even more?
Well, that's the second part of the problem. The first part of the problem is we can't stop known criminals at our borders from coming in. The second part of the problem, and it's not just EU rules, it's also the Human Rights Act, is we actually have a big problem now in deporting people who've committed crimes.
Well, you can't say 7% of all crime across the 28 EU member states was caused by Romanian gangs, because Europol doesn't say that. Europol says 7% of all gangs are Romanian, which is a very different thing.
No, 7% of crime.
No, that's not what they say.
Well, maybe they're getting nervous and backtracking, but I can assure you we've checked and sourced all of our figures, the 92%, the 28,000, the 7%. These are very powerful figures. All they are there for is an illustration that we should not have open-door migration, and we must have control of our borders and stop criminal gangs who are trafficking and using and abusing people. Now, this is happening in our country, and we shouldn't allow it to happen.
Gary Gibbon reporting. Well, now, I'm joined by Mariana Gordon, an artist and filmmaker who came to the United Kingdom from Romania 30 years ago as a refugee, and Oana Romacha, a migration researcher who represents New Europeans, a non-political organisation that promotes the European Union. Well, let's just cut to the quick. I mean, what do you make of, as a Romanian by origin, what do you make of Nigel Farage's particular comments?
Yes, I mean, we all know Nigel Farage and UKIP is just really, he's a one-issue man, and UKIP is a one-issue party, and that issue is immigration. And
I thought it was Romanians.
Well, it is, but you know, it's immigration from Romania, and he's finger pointing it. But he's using immigration as a smoke screen for actually his bigger political ambitions, which is actually probably getting Britain out of the EU.
So, in your book, that doesn't make him a racist.
And it's not for me to judge him as a, being a racist or not. And I don't think he is a racist, but he's definitely not pleasant,
Mariana Gordon, as a Romanian, I mean, but 35 years ago you came here.
Yes.
And you came here as a political...
I was a political refugee in 1979. My life was saved by the great British people.
I see in your book you actually dedicated, you say, this book is dedicated to the great British people for saving my life.
Yes, sir.
How so?
As still a teenager, age 19, I was arrested and charged with high treason and conspiring against the state, and sentenced to 30 years in jail by Ceausescu, and I narrowly escaped. I came to Britain, my life was saved. And
how would you feel if somebody said now, 35 years old, you'd now have to live next door to Nigel Farage?
I would say I'm afraid he wasn't far wrong about his, I really wouldn't want to live next door to a bunch of unruly Romanians myself, whether in England or in Romania.
So to some extent he was right.
Of course, but that's being right is not the whole picture. That's the point. He was right.
Let's just deal with that for a moment.
Romania is not a civilized country.
You two look to me to be rather nice people to live next door to. So but you're prepared to let Nigel Farage bracket you all as people that wouldn't be nice to live next to?
I wouldn't live next door. I wouldn't like to live, if I had the choice, next door to unruly people.
But that would be of any race.
But this is not a race. It's not a race issue. I don't think Nigel Farage is racist. I think he's learned something from this influx of Romanians. Some of them, because they're mixed up with gypsies, it's just politically incorrect to call them gypsies anymore. And you can't tell them. We can't even tell them apart. The Romanian and gypsies, they sort of have bad habits of exploiting their women and children, and they're unruly.
But that is a very, very specific group. It is not the whole of Romania, is it?
Well, yes, but they can easily...
You tell us.
I mean, we have seen that whenever his discourse and rhetoric is challenged, like we saw in the interview on LBC last week, his argument does not stand. His claims about 29 Romanians and Bulgarians coming here, it was just, a big, out of proportions. It's just really is,
But you see, this country has a proud tradition of a gypsy population who've lived, very many of them on the move, travellers. They live in our community and outside it.
The argument is not about race. It's about right and wrong. Do we have... Britain is the most civilized country in the world. And if we have people coming here, they should be civilized.
But forgive me, I mean, the issue here is, can you actually brand everybody from one particular nation as in some way unruly and difficult, which is, after all, rather what you've done?
No, he's done it for... Well, obviously, when I said Britain is the most civilized country in the world, I stand by it. It's not perfect. There's room for improvement, as we all know. But it's by far the most civilized country. And I think we should use discernment. We should select right from wrong. Of course, politically, he was possibly... wrong, but he caught the
possibly
press.
Wrong, but you think definitely wrong.
It's, he can't judge Romanians by just one issue and, labeling us criminals. It's like me judging Britain just by UKIP. And, you can't do that, can you? Because I've been living here for, so many years, and Britain is a welcoming country, and Romanians on a daily basis, they do not feel discriminated en masse. There are cases, indeed, where they do face discrimination, but it doesn't mean that is, widespread.
Right. Una Ramocha and Mariana Gordon, thank you both very much for coming in. Kathy.
Thanks, John.